Hello, hello. It's Elizabeth Busby here with the Theology of the Body Institute. No, I messed that up because, okay, let me start over. You can keep going because I know I don't get a do-over. I'm starting over. Hello, hello. I'm Elizabeth Busby, the Director of Programs with the Theology of the Body Institute. Thank you for joining me for the Discerning Marriage podcast. As you can see, I have the renowned Damon Owens with me, and I was all flustered because we were just rapping Hamilton before this started.
No, you were rapping Hamilton.
I was rapping Hamilton.
I was ad-libbing.
He was helping me though, so I was really excited and jazzed and pumped, and then Thomas was like, I'm just going to push record, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I don't want rapping Hamilton to be on my podcast channel, so I got my tongue all tied up. But we're working now. We're talking about important things, and I am pumped to have you with me.
Excited.
Damon Owens, thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation. It's good to be here.
So for those of you who don't know Damon Owens, I am pumped to have him on my channel. He very much for me is one of the giants of Theology of the Body. I have known your name way before I was anyone that you would need to know. When I went on my first Theology of the Body 1, my very first TOB course, so really my first real exposure with the Institute, he was executive director, and I cornered him in the cafeteria after lunch one day, and I was basically gushing how I want to work in Theology of the Body, what do I do, D. And with the same reverence that you talk to everybody that I've seen, me now that I'm working here, I've seen, you came to our Revealed event, so all of you Catholic Hollywood people were there. I saw you interacting with them. You had that same reverence for my dignity when I was just a student there. And I vividly remember that. And I was so touched and delighted. So he's the real deal, you guys. He knows Jesus and loves Jesus. And it is evident in the way that you interact with everybody. So I'm not surprised that you've climbed the ranks and you're one of those big TOB names because you're living it. It's real. And I'm just delighted that now I'm in a place where I can have you with me at this table that you bought and refinished. And we just found that out.
He remembered.
So fun. He was like, hey, I got this. I was like, yes, it's a great table. Anyway, so I'm really pumped to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I hope I don't disappoint you today, but that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
So I am really excited to have him here to talk about this discussion. Well, I guess I'll just tell you what it is. We're going to talk about, Damon and I are going to talk about the tough conversations that it's really important to have when you're dating and discerning marriage. And you're perfect for this. One, because you're gentle and good, and you have this way of engaging with people that I think makes it easier to talk about hard stuff. But also, you've been married for a long time. How long have you been married?
Coming up on 30 years.
Heyo!
1994.
Oh my gosh.
So we're, it'll be April, I guess next year. Yeah, we'll be... Yeah.
Thanks be to God.
93. Oh my gosh. Did I just say 94? Sorry, Mel. April 24th, 1993.
Oh my gosh. We're October 24th.
Hey.
2015.
So,
but yeah,
almost 30 years. We're early enough to claim 30.
I love it. You are. And you have lots of babies.
We do. And Lord's blessed us with 8 children.
Thanks be to God.
And I say all boys except the first 7. So I have a house full of girls. Had a house full of girls. 4 are moving on. But now 2 grandbabies. So it's definitely a new season that's enjoyable. Yes, you may call me granddad, and I'll smile when you say it.
I love it. I love it. So he has a wealth of knowledge, both from his own 30 years and of being married. You've been working in the Lord's vineyard like this for a long time, too.
Time flies. As you were talking about that. Well, we started, Melanie and I, in the first year we were married, 1993, we were immediately into pre-Cana. We went into natural family planning, teacher training. We dove right in, and we did that together till about 2000, 2001, when we had enough babies that Melanie was like, peace, I'm out. And I discerned in 2002 to leave corporate and go full-time in ministry. So I've been in full-time ministry since 2002.
Oh, that's 20 years.
It is.
That's a long time.
It's truth.
And you fully raised 4 babies. You're still working on 4 more. Exactly. And you're granddad now. So he has a lot to offer you guys. He has a lot to offer.
I hope so.
A lot to offer me, a lot to offer you. So I'm excited. Okay, so just generally speaking, as a father in particular, that's kind of what I'm asking about at first. What are your thoughts on the topic of tough conversations in dating?
Yeah, just transparency, which is the only way I operate, is, a lot of it is learning from my own mistakes, learning from both the lived experience, but also these great principles that's part of the theology of the body. And much of if you want to understand sort of the macro, it's like melding these two worlds where in these moments of these different seasons, either as a young father, a new husband, a father of teenagers and then young adults. And then each of these seasons sort of teaches a different nuance, even adopting, like our 2 youngest are adopted.
I was going to mention that, you guys. We're also adoptive parents. So I love adoptive
that whole experience is beyond, and we adopted after we had 6.
That's amazing.
So Olivia and Nathan came to us through adoption, and you start to think you sort of plateau in terms of understanding. At that point, we had been teaching natural family planning for like 15 years, but there's just so much more to learn, so much more to learn about yourself, myself, to learn about my beloved Melanie and kids. So part of that question about hard conversations is having done it so poorly for so long. And
that is not what I thought you were about to say.
Well,
wait, seriously?
Yeah, because it's a lot of it was temperament, right? My temperament is, without getting into a lot of analytics, I'm avoidant when it comes to conflict. I don't like conflict.
I was going to say that is not my vibe of you, but when it comes to, I don't conflict with you, so I can appreciate that I don't know that side of you.
Well, just wait till we have some conflict, and you're going to see me sort of make it everything good, and then kind of walk away before it falls apart. So that's my instinct. So I've had to learn you can't operate that way in marriage. You can't operate that way in an intimacy or as a father, and you just can't operate that in love and in Christ. So my journey is what I'm getting to has been one from whose natural posture is one of avoidance, is one who you have to stand and you have to engage. But then the question is, how do you engage? At what point do you initiate the hard conversation? At what point does it take the courage to receive the invitation, to have that kind of conversation, good or bad, well done or not well done? So the whole difficult conversation, first and foremost, conjures up attachment styles of the people in the conversation.
Yes.
Some fight, some flee, some freeze.
Yeah.
Some are very, like I said, avoidant. Some are very anxious. So it's like, oh, well, let's finish this conversation now, and we have to get an answer now, and make sure everything is, So, and then some are very secure, where it's like, we just disagree, but I love the heck out of you. So my point is that learning over these years has been from that perspective of someone who's had to learn how to stand in a very uncomfortable and a very difficult situation, not necessarily to resolve it like my engineering heart wants to fix it and then make it right, but the whole process of that engagement is meant to be a place of holiness. I know that I won't get too spiritual, because again, in my mind, it was always
it's sacred.
It is sacred,
ground.
and it's sacred because the conflict. It really isn't about resolving the conflict as much as it is about communicating authentic love to a person, even when there's an issue that divides us. So the issue can divide people, but it doesn't have to. Can divide in the subject, but it doesn't have to divide people. If that makes sense, right?
Yes.
So we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable.
Yes.
And we can express, not only that, we can express an authentic tenderness and love for one another that actually brings us closer together, even when we have an irreconcilable disagreement. That blew my mind.
When you learned that?
Even as a concept, because I didn't learn it as a concept. I learned it in the real conflict with Melanie. Who
you learned experientially first.
I did. And then the principle made absolute sense afterwards.
Wow.
So, and there are great teachers that teach about charitable interpretation, or they'll teach about caretaking in conflict. And you hear these principles, they would have meant nothing to me. I mean, but seeing the fruit of treating every conflict and every hard conversation as an accusation and as a project to fix so that we could love each other is the completely wrong posture. And once those things for me were sort of put in their proper place, the hard conversation is almost look forward to it.
Because it draws you closer. You're closer at the end.
You do. And you get to learn more about yourself, and you learn more about this person that you love, and you get a chance in a difficult, tense situation to express your love. That's not necessarily based on emotion. Yeah. It's based on this willing your good. I want your good. And I'm fascinated. There's a genuine curiosity. Like, you really think that really hurts you when I did that? That really bothers you?
Yeah.
You really need that? I never knew that about you. So that healthy curiosity was something that I had to work on, because I wanted Melanie's happiness so deeply, so much, and I wrapped it into my own identity, that when she wasn't happy, I knew I was a failure. So all she had to do was say, I'm not happy, and that was the accusation you're manifesting. Right. Completely, unlike what she was thinking or her intentions
She wasn't intending to say that to you.
So I think that the starting point for discussing hard conversations is really that internal checking of our heart. But what do we assume? What are the assumptions that happen when there's disagreement? So therefore, what does that hard conversation mean? Is it an indictment? Is it an accusation? Is it an occasion? Is it just life? Is it catastrophic that our relationship is in the balance? Because you're going to approach that hard conversation differently.
Absolutely.
If your entire future is on the balance.
Absolutely.
It's just catastrophe.
Yeah.
Right? We've never fought before. Now we have a disagreement. So that right posture of curiosity, of deep respect for this other person, and the reality that it's not catastrophic. In fact, this is what love is.
Yes.
Long answer, but that's where I would start.
I love it. When did you figure that out? How many years in?
See, what year is this?
Almost 30. Almost 30.
Almost 30. Definitely not in the first 10 years.
Wow. So you were like in it with babies and all these duties.
If I had to throw a number out, I would say 20 years in.
Wow.
We had a major sort of reordering in 2013.
Okay.
And Melanie and I've talked about this publicly. And it wasn't like a separation as much as it was just sort of the hands up, like, this is not working. We need to do something fundamentally different. I'm not happy.
Gosh. Wow.
And that
both of you.
Both of us, but she I'm the avoidant one, so I'm not going to bring that up.
That's true. So she was like, I'm not happy. And you were like,
we got to do something about it. Because at that point I was so exhausted. I had been running and racing and struggling and doing everything I thought I needed to do to be a good husband, a good father, provider, and all these things, and failing in some sense, in the sense that in my measure.
Sure.
So when she said that, I had no fight left, and I was like, "Yep, we got to figure this out."
And you did.
And then, and it was sort of that hard look back at, the decades that we knew each other and the way we've disappointed each other, the expectations we brought into marriage, our inability to have hard conversations that really satisfy. And in terms of intimacy and connection and belonging, and really just treating everything like a project or as a to-do list. So that really can't manifest. I think it lasted that long just because I'm stubborn, or because we both really, really, really wanted our marriage to work. We wanted to suffer in some sort of false martyrdom of marriage is just hard. Marriage is hard. So that kind of thing.
So this is it. Yeah. But instead of being like, no, it is hard, but we can also work on this, and this part doesn't have to be hard. Like we together can face the hard instead of the hard being us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's when you say that's exactly how Melanie approached it. Like we this is how we can actually grow closer. This is how, if we were so much better together than we are, if we did this together. The whole thing was, from her perspective, was like, I miss not being in this with you, or she would say being on the same page. That was the phrase that we got all the time. And after all the years of her saying that, it made a different sense to me when I received it differently.
I love that. So I am assuming that you would agree that learning how to have these kinds of hard conversations and being willing to have some of them early on, like even before you're married, when you're dating, when you're discerning marriage with someone, when you're choosing a partner, that would be a good thing to spend some energy figuring out.
It's an affective, maturing life skill.
Yes.
Because it's not just in the most intimate of relationships like marriage or romantic relationship. It's about having friends. It's about knowing.
Yes.
And without them, by the way, we start to set up all of these sort of coping mechanisms. Like people tell you need to set boundaries. You need to self-care. And all those things are absolutely true. But outside of the schema of building intimacy, they're just coping mechanisms.
Well
they're just,
said.
I gather all of these things. Well, I got to get my nails done here. I've got to make sure that I don't let people talk to me this way, and I have to tell them this, and they can work for a while, but they don't build intimacy.
No, you end up being very alone. You draw big walls around yourself because they're not within the context of relationship.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Or for the good of the relation. They're more for our survival. Which is not bad. We need to survive.
It's not bad, but you can get beyond surviving to thriving, and that's part of what we're here for, to help you guys out. Okay, so what are some of the tough topics that you think are critical to talk about before engagement? And at what point in the dating relationships did you bring this up? So obviously some are early, some are later. You should please disclose all your stuff before you get married. But like, there's a certain.
I'm not so sure, but we can talk about that too. I'm not so sure. Full disclosure, but the things that come to mind, and just keep in mind, Melanie and I have worked in marriage preparation for decades. I mean, tens of thousands of couples,
Man, thanks be to God.
And sometimes, just from the podium, sometimes working across the table like this with couples, so all kind of different situations. And one thing that it does provide is a whole lot of humility and a whole lot of, sometimes through humiliation, sometimes through just recognizing that everybody has their own story. It's a great Protestant ministers say, our testimony is still getting written. So entering into somebody's testimony, like you just met and you're beginning in the dating, you've got a whole history where as a sister, a brother, a son, a daughter, a friend, somebody else's girlfriend or boyfriend. You've got a whole relational history that you haven't even unpacked. And every one of those relationships has revealed something about you.
Yes.
So that sort of sense of humility, of that curious inquiry of this other person, this appreciation of them as unique and unrepeatable, of really being a kindness, to them, and growing in an empathy. That's sort of a schema that one of our presenters at the Catholic Merit Summit talked about. They called it CAKE, right? So,
nice.
And being curious, being appreciative, being kind, and being empathetic. These are sort of the human life skills that when you're meeting someone, you move in and out of difficult and easy conversation, because the whole point of it is not about, things that are radioactive that you got to prepare yourself for in order to have. You'll have a few of those.
Sure.
But it should be within the context of that curiosity, appreciation, kindness, and empathy, where I just want to get to know you and my life is not on the line.
Yes.
And so early on, you want to know
line.
things. You do want to know things like family of origin.
Okay.
Tell me about your relationship with your mom or your dad. And it doesn't have to be a query. You're not going to send them a doodle. You're not going to send them, a MailChimp or any kind of, survey monkey. But, you want to just find the story. What are your other relationships like? And you want to see those intimate relationships of the family with, good, bad, and ugly, will give you an indication about their home base. It's not a destiny, but it's a home base of what intimate relationship means to them and what it means to you. Difficult relationships are all there, but the conversation in the beginning should be sort of like, how do you see the world? What's your worldview? Again, curious, appreciative, kindness, and empathy. Your life's not on the line. You're not interviewing but you really want to know, what's your worldview? Because I guarantee you it is different than you. I don't care if you met in the same youth group, if you vote the same, if you believe. There's a unique, unrepeatable person that's meeting another unique, unrepeatable person. And there's a beautiful dance that happens in not just learning about the person. It's not one way. When you learn about them, it actually shines more wisdom about yourself. I know that sounds corny. It sounds
it's true.
It's so true.
It's true.
You're like, I never thought of it that way. I thought everybody put the toilet paper this way. You mean the forks up, the forks go down.
Oh, yeah, the toilet paper.
So, and these things are obvious. It's not like, oh, that's so cute, you put your toilet paper this way. It's like, that's not the way it goes. That's just not. Don't you have cats? Because if a cat gets it, it's going to be like that. So, and these things that are sort of the assumptions, they just get deeper the closer you get.
Yep.
Because you have expectations about what it means to be a wife someday.
Yes, you do.
They have expectations about what it means to be a husband someday. And like a iceberg, there's only like 10% of it, 5% that's actually above surface. That if you had to write down, you'd write them. The other 90%, 95%, they're so well hidden in you that they don't come to light until the conflict.
Well said.
Yeah?
Yeah. Okay, so family of origin is one for sure. And you think that would be something early on, like...
Fun.
Okay.
It's fun. Tell me about, do you have any brothers, sisters? Are you close with them? What's the, just
so not intense, just like conversational.
Yeah, where do you come from? I'm trying to keep this in some kind of order, but if I go out of order, we'll go back and go back. Sort of in terms of importance, some of the real important things to talk about are you're getting to addictions, you're getting to habituations. Yes. But again, this is not an interview in that sense, but you really can't avoid those conversations. What do you do when you're lonely? When you're sad, when you're bored, when you're tired.
That is a great question.
Yeah. Like
well phrased.
But you can flip it. You can say, hey, what are the fun things that you do? What things really bring you delight? What are the things that if you could just do and you would, just getting to know what delights, because then you'll see, oh, this person's really an introvert or this one's an extrovert.
Nice.
This one really loves to be outdoors. This one, this guy really loves is a tech and likes to, figure things out. I'm a tinkerer, and I'm an all these different things are just part of the wonder of meeting somebody. So I really think the first, several months, sort of that euphoric delight of finding someone that you really vibe with, that people say, nah, we really vibing, it's because you're seeing things that in another person that you've never seen in that combination before. And it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's fun. So again, getting out of that interview mode, you really do need to see how this person sees the world and themselves in it. Now, getting deep, if you want to sort of open up the hood.
Let's do it.
there are two fundamental questions that secular, religious, and it's human. It's so human, it's universal. It's non-controversial. We need to know that we're worthy to be loved for who we are. Not for what we do, not what we accomplish, not for how we perform, not how effective we are. As Damon Owens, good, bad, and ugly, broken, beautiful, blessed, that I'm worthy to be loved for who I am. And every one of us has a whole lifetime experience of either being affirmed in that or being, what's the word? What's the opposite of being affirmed in it? To be denied.
Yeah.
That
torn down.
Broken down, right? Edified or de-edified, right?
There you go.
And sort of getting into that very delicately, getting into that helps you to see, this person as someone who either fundamentally believes that they're worthy to be loved for who they are, or is still striving for that affirmation and confirmation, because we all are. The question is just how much of that dominates, your decisions, your self-concept, how you can even see me.
Yeah.
Am I worthy to be loved for who I am? And the second is, are others just fundamentally willing and capable of fulfilling my needs? And I say fulfilling meaning trying to fulfill my needs. And
right.
Because nobody can fulfill your needs. I was correct on that the other day, right? And I believe that. But at the same time, the idea that outside of me, my desires have a place of fulfillment.
Right.
So God, spouse, husband or wife, children, friends, the whole mix here, it is part of a fulfillment. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily your spouse is definitely not the one who's going to fulfill you.
No. Ultimate fulfillment by God, but humans can share in that and can
we have
fulfill
a duty
some of your needs. Yes,
exactly.
You're back to attachment style.
Exactly, you got it.
You're back to attachment style.
So that attachment style says either I fundamentally believe that you're part of this fulfillment, or I really don't. So I'm not even going to expect anything from you.
Right.
Or I'm getting off the bat like, I know you're going to hurt me, so let's just get it over with and figure out how you're going to hurt me. Or I just don't even expect you this part of my life. Here's the silo, and I've got everything else that I put together that I do in order to grasp my happiness. I've got my organization skills. I've got my teams. I've got my work. I've got my successes, and together it makes me a modicum of happiness. So relationally, we're not the only ones asking it. They're asking it as well.
Right. Absolutely.
So the whole dialogos, the dialogue, the word between is about, is this person willing and capable of even desiring my happiness as much as I do? And that's that's the beginning of the willing of the good.
It is. And it's so important.
It's huge, because when the seasons we talk about in relationship come and go, that first one of delight and ecstasy and eros and seeking, it's so beautiful to love, falling in love, and to all that is beautiful. And this sort of like that jet fuel, Christopher talks about that a lot, taught me that, like that analogy that you got to go from 0 to 1 in acceleration, right? And eros is what moves us forward. But at some point it's calling forth this act of the will, that I will your good, that I'm delighted by your will, and I want to order my life, to help you. I'm not in charge of your happiness, but to help you in your search for joy. And marriage, fundamentally, let's keep our sacraments in order here too. The fundamental requirement for marriage, the sacrament of marriage, is the freedom to consent.
Yes.
So this is not off topic here.
No,
because
it's very on topic.
All these conversations are not meant to find your perfect spouse. They're meant to build your confidence that this person, or even you, are capable of freely consenting to what marriage is.
Good point.
Yeah.
That is a good point. I don't think I've made that on this channel before, that like you're not trying to find the perfect person, because there is no perfect person, right? But you are trying to find someone who could be a good option and who can validly enter into marriage and who will stay the course with you.
That's it.
Well said. Even reframing it that way, like that may be something that like lit up a light bulb for someone, just like, what am I even looking for? And I'm looking for someone that can freely consent, that will stay in it for the long run, and that I enjoy, because I need to like them also.
Exactly. And then you can look at it as sort of on one side, there are absolutes that violate that freedom. And those are things like addictions, whether they're substance addictions, whether they're relational addictions, whether they're behavioral addictions. I mean, there's a whole thing. And what we mean by addiction, I mean by it is that there are things that you flee to when you're lonely, bored, sad, angry, tired, the emotional things that you cling to that escape from the actual hard conversation, from the work that it takes to grow in intimacy and vulnerability and all the things that are necessary for love.
Right.
So addictions really, they rob your freedom to will yourself the good, to receive another, and to stand with one another, right?
Right. Because you're bound by the other thing. Like your freedom is compromised in having to engage in that behavior or that relationship or that substance or whatever.
It's habituated, it's compulsive, that kind of thing. And the other is abuse. And abuse has also a wider range than most can acknowledge. It could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be intellectual, it could be anything that robs habitually the other person of the assurance that they are a son or daughter of God the Father is abusive. And acknowledging that those habits means that before we enter into this, we need to have a confident new habituation. We need to know that I don't just want to love you. I don't want this addiction anymore. I'm going to quit this thing. I'm going to change it. That's a great start. Anybody in 12 Steps AA will tell you, you got to name it, you got to claim it, and you got to be willing to do it. But that's not the same thing as having new habit.
Right.
Right.
And taking the active steps to make the changes.
And there, to your podcast, is the discernment. Because the discernment is no absolute that says, okay, now you're ready to marry. It's a discernment about the freedom and how much of this has either robbed the present freedom or threatens our future freedom. Because it's interesting in with marriage that even as Christians, we sometimes fall in the idea that it's the level that we've reached and sort of the crown of we're ready for marriage now. And that's not totally untrue. But in a real sense, you're not pledging past or present love. You're pledging a future love.
Well said.
And it's a future love that you don't control. But when you pledge to, and as Christians, we bind ourselves to love itself and to be a conduit of that love to the other. So that's why it's an act of the will. And it's filled with emotion and passion and intellect, because we know it's all human. But at the end, we're pledging to bind ourselves to love itself and to be a vehicle to will Christ's love to another. And of course, we're partaking of this as we are giving it.
Sure.
And when both make it, it ends up being this communio that we're tied in, and, 3 to get married. It's the community. I mean, all the Christian stuff sort of breaks open. But, recognizing that we're pledging a future love also changes the criteria of why we would enter into a hard conversation.
Right.
Of what we expect from it. Because what I wanted to make sure I said was that these hard conversations and these disagreements, the goal is not agreement.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that.
The goal is not
to be on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal is to know, I love you in your worldview. I love you as you are. The Gottman Institute, famous. Are you talking about them?
Yes. I'm level 1 Gottman trained in my as a therapist. Yeah,
yes.
I love the Gottmans. I talk about them all the time. All my people are like,
so you know this one.
She planted him to say Gottmans. No, I didn't even know you were going to say that.
So listen, listen. So one of their many gems is literally 2/3 of all marital arguments, self-reported from happy marriages, are never resolved.
Absolutely, perpetual problems.
Perpetual problems. So those perpetual problems, if the answer was we need to be on the same page, none of us. It's not human. It's not realistic.
Right.
Let's just get
you're not the same person.
Yeah.
How boring would your life be if you were just
and
the
think
same person?
And think about what hurts the most in those disagreements. It's the sense of maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm bad, maybe I'm dumb. It's the shame that comes on. It's not about the disagreement. It's maybe we're not compatible. Maybe we're not meant to be. Maybe we can't be happy.
Maybe you won't still choose me.
Exactly. I'll be rejected. All of that. That's the real fear here. It's not the sense that we're voting the same or that we see the same way to parent our daughter. Or the real question is, do we still belong to each other irreplaceably? So if you're having a hard conversation to get on to say, especially if you're a control person, if you're a control person and you want the situations controlled, the emotions controlled, you want everything to be you are going to be miserable. You're going to not even hate the conversations. You're going to be the one who's like chasing after your spouse or your boyfriend. Be like, we need to resolve this right now. We need to get to the answer now because we can't, we're not supposed to go to bed while we're angry because the scripture says that, it's this anxious sort of,
graspy.
Graspy, sense that our disagreement means catastrophic end to our marriage. That's, oh my gosh, it's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
But you also can't be the one who flees, who says,
Right.
you know what, we're going to be fine, whatever. Just, yes, dear. You know, that whole joke, the whole yes, dear.
Yeah.
That is a despairing decision to not be intimate. It's like, this is as good as it gets.
Well said.
As good as it gets. And as long as, you know, everything's, dinner's on, as long as I'm back from work, as long as we got the bills paid, we're doing better than most, let's not rock the boat. See, I guess my point is that with all of these conversations in discerning marriage, it's preparation for marriage.
Absolutely.
So it's the habits that come. It's the way of how do we grow in our intimacy through not just conflict, but even things we agree on. It's actually harder to grow in intimacy with things you agree on than it is.
Right, because it just happens.
It
You
just
don't
happens.
have to work for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So do you have any tips on like how to initiate those discussions? Because I think there are some people out there who are probably like, yeah, that sounds great, but how on earth do you recommend just jumping into it? Do you have any sort of like lead up that you think is helpful that you've seen work for people? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there are some skills. There are definitely some skills in this that need to go and to recognize that it's not so much a cookie cutter, say this, do this, move this, because we're not cookie cutters, right?
Right.
But they're principles to abide by. The first is to acknowledge, to understand how you are received.
Okay.
To avoid accusation, to avoid the nagging. And I'm not just talking about women, men do it too.
They do.
To avoid the, again, I use accusation. Accusation is the big one, right? So there is a preparation time. I think there's also a fairness in saying, you know, I'd really like to have a hard conversation with you. It might be hard. I don't want it to be, but I also just want to make sure that, you know, you're ready for that. You know, is this a good time or you want to maybe talk later on?
Yep.
It's giving, again, based on temperament, personality, the time to sort of prepare for these, because most of us are not used to that springing on, because sometimes we're just tired. Sometimes we're just already angry from something else at work.
Sometimes we're hungry.
Sometimes we're hungry. Seriously. The other thing is framing, and this is from my good friends, the Parolas from Australia, and they talk about this technique of feeling, right? So this is called the life technique, as they call it, right? And this is also part of Epic Intimacy in our Joyful Ever After series, and they talk about framing our statements as I feels. And it sounds trite. It sounds like, oh, I feels.
But it's not, y'all. It's good.
This is transformative.
Yes.
It is transformative.
Because then you're not accusing.
You're not.
It's so tempting to start a hard conversation with you. But if you're mindful of not saying you, and you start with I feel, I mean, that's huge.
And again, it's not a manipulative, because what it actually does, it gets to the real point. The real point is not what you've done to me. It's how I feel.
Nice. Well said.
And the feeling is not just sort of squishy emotion. The Parolas, they have this beautiful wheel of more emotion words than as a 50-year-old man I've ever seen in my life. So angry doesn't just work it, or sad, or it's like 15 words in sort of a pie chart of, and what it does is it helps you to get to the vulnerability of what I'm really feeling, because that's the heart of it. It's not what I'm thinking, it's what I'm feeling. To be able to express that and then to embellish on it, to be heard, and then to know that you're heard based on saying, "Oh, I hear you saying that I hurt you when this, and it made you feel this or this, and I'm sorry, that was not what I meant to do at all. I'm sorry I made you feel that way." And there's more to it in terms of how you're received. Because sometimes those feel statements can sound manipulative. They can sound patronizing if they're received that way. So you have to learn the language. You have to learn the love language, literally, of your beloved to communicate that is not my intent. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. Own it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry that I made you feel, even if it's like, I didn't do that. That's not even, why should I
didn't mean
do that?
to. That was my intention.
Yeah, get over it.
They still feel like
you're
it.
really so sensitive. Why are you so sensitive? I didn't mean, now let's get to the sort of the defensive piece. But the I feel sort of frames this hard conversation as a benevolent request, as an opening that if you really want to know what's happening, this is what, and even acknowledging, I guess I don't feel like you did that on purpose, but I can't deny this is how it made me feel.
Yes.
And so then the conversation is around, what were your intentions? What were you thinking? And it could be, I snapped that one. I didn't mean that, and I apologize. Oh, you know what? I was angry because 2 days ago you said this to me, and unfairly, I was still stewing. I was resentful, and I'm still salty about that. And I was wrong to do that. So it opens up the I feel to the I hear you, I respond, and then to your I feel. And then just the last piece that the sort of big principle with this is there really is a formula for positives to negatives that we need to be attentive to. That for every sort of negative, I've seen other numbers, but
you gonna quote the Gottmans?
Gottmans
you
was
about to give me the Gottmans?
Well, if your relationship is good, right? For every negative, it's 5. If you're in a deficit situation where you're very hurt, it's something like 20 to 1.
For happy marriages, for
happy
every one
marriage.
negative, 20 positive interactions.
And it sounds crazy.
It sounds crazy.
Except when you think about yourself.
Absolutely.
And
then you're like, but I
what?
want. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's something real to that. And it's not just a sandwich game of, but even a 2 to 1 acknowledges, because there's something you're grateful for.
Absolutely.
And starting with that gratitude, this is science and it's faith. It's both. When we do the work to find something that we're grateful for, we can't be resentful at the same time. Gratitude and resentment cannot exist in the body at the same moment.
Well
said.
That's
Fear
so good.
and faith can't exist in the body at the same moment.
Wow.
So when we do the work for gratitude, I'm really grateful that you work so hard for this. I'm really grateful that you take the time. I know you travel a lot. I'm so grateful that we get to go out to dinner. I'm so grateful. And be honest about it. It has to be authentic. Yeah. Then our brain is already disconnected from the resentment. Now it can flood right back.
Sure.
So we have to be attentive.
Yes.
But there's something about, there's a delight and a peace, a lightness when we abide in that gratitude, that when the resentment comes back, we feel the heaviness again. And we're like, I don't want that. I mean, you don't. You don't want that. So those are probably 3 things that I'd recommend.
That is so helpful. Y'all, you'll probably have to rewind and rewrite them down because those were so good. Oh, I kind of wish I would have taken my notes too, so I'll have to go back and watch it. That's so great. So knowing that the bulk of my listeners are still discerning marriage, right? They're not married yet, basically. They're still trying to figure out whether they're single or they're in a relationship. Like, what does God have for me? So what is like one practical tip related to this topic of tough conversations that they can turn off this podcast and go implement in their life if they want to? I love the practical stuff. So what's one practical tip that you think that someone who's in that season could use?
Yeah. I think I'd go with that last comment. I think one of the things we can do for ourselves, for relationship, is that work of gratitude.
I was kind of hoping you would say that because that's such a good one. Like gratitude journals,
journal,
like every day, how many things
you could literally do
it
on the way to the date, on the way to the meeting. You could literally, just to get your mindset into it, just think, what am I grateful for in this person that they've what do I admire? What is something, and trust me, that it opens up our minds and our hearts to be able to receive. Well, thank you for that. I could probably do better because I really wanted to do. Now you've got this affirmative, I want to be better, even though you've seemingly edified some, as opposed to the accusation. Then you get into the whole, like, the posture, like, Mom, I really suck. I've got the gospel to suck. I'm trying to be good. I just don't. I'm trying, It gets a heavy to go from that negative to the, okay, I'll do better. But I think for a practical thing, I think it's even writing 1, 2, 3, 4 things down that you're grateful for. There's a lightness to the whole conversation.
Perfect. There it is. Well, thank you so much, Damon. Seriously, you're the real deal, and I love it. Like this whole time, I've just soaked in what you have to teach me, and so I'm hoping that my listeners have done the same. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the work that you've put in these 30 years to your marriage, that it's bearing so much fruit.
We feel like we're just getting started. We do.
You're so cute. I love it. I love it. You are just getting started on a new season with your grandbabies.
Yes, we are.
So fun. Next generation. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming out here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for all of you guys, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know your time is so precious, and I'm grateful that you give some of it to us. So it's a joy to have you. And until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid.